Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Giant Leap podcast. Today I'm joined by 0xHank from Darkseas. So, Hank, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to chat. I know that you're a big builder in the space,
Uh,
and I always love meeting new builders. So
a new builder, that's for sure. Definitely not a big builder yet, but thanks for coming in and having a chat. We um, got started, I think, after watching the Bogota talk from the Mud Guys, and then we obviously watched with keen interest what you guys did during the Hacker House. I think it was in London. Is that correct?
yeah, that's right. Yeah, the residency in London.
Yes, I'd love to talk to you more about that. And then obviously we've been following your progress and actually played around with Dark Seas during one of your open play tests, and it was really cool. So really glad to have you on the show. But before we dive into sort of on-chain gaming and Web3, like what's your gaming background in general? Like, what did you play? What are you playing?
Um, so I actually just got a gaming PC. My friend Kushaba, who's actually one of the
Skystrife?
team over at Lattice, who's making Skystrife. Yeah, he was like, I just got a new GPU, and I have some parts that I want to get rid of. And I had never had a gaming PC before, and he was like, "You want to just like come grab it for me?" And so I just this past week, and I just finished setting up my gaming PC.
Very
So
cool.
I was playing a bit of Hades. He's trying to get me into Sea of Thieves. He's like, if you're really trying to build like a naval game, how have you not played Sea of Thieves before? So I'm gonna jump on with him at some point in the near future.
Yeah, fantastic.
Um, but yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't really game a lot over the past few years. I played a lot of sports growing up, and so my big sport was actually ultimate frisbee.
Mm.
I played that in university. When I was a kid, I just played like a kind of like all the normie games. Like I played sports games, Assassin's Creed, Uncharted, and I've kind of dabbled in some more strategy games as well. Like I played a lot of FTL. Like I said, I played some Hades. Um, I play a very little bit of Dwarf Fortress, just like some of the really like kind of out there games that feel more blockchainy. So yeah, I would say I'm not like my background isn't like full like degen like gamer like 8 hours a day necessarily, but
Mm.
I think that my background has been kind of an interesting way to get into kind of the blockchain gaming space.
Yeah, absolutely. And same goes for myself, actually. I used to play quite a lot when I shouldn't have been, when I should have been studying back in high school and uni. And then I took a bit of a long break, with doing startup things and other things, and just didn't really have time to kind of sit down in front of a computer and play for many hours. But yeah, I grew up on strategy games, RTSs, the Age of Empires and Dawn of Wars at the time, with LAN parties and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I got my start in gaming, and actually
Right.
more recently, I got a gaming PC as well after many years because again, ETH mining and GPUs were just crazy, right? In terms of like
Yeah, yeah.
our industry sort of like cock blocking ourselves into playing games. So yeah, I've been spending quite a bit of time in Cyberpunk recently because I finally could
Oh, cool.
crank up the settings and
Yeah,
but absolutely agree with games like Dwarf Fortress and RimWorld potentially as being good fits for on-chain games, and that's actually
yeah.
one of our big inspirations as well for where we would eventually like to go in terms of what we're building. But before we get into that, it's how'd you get started in Web3? Is this kind of the first thing you're doing Web3, or did you do some stuff in Web3 before on-chain games?
So no, so my I was kind of onboarded right into on-chain games, which is fairly uncommon, I would say. I had a friend in college who his uncle nerd sniped him into Dark Forest.
Very nice.
His uncle is Will Robinson,
Ah,
who's kind
yes.
of an on-chain gaming name. He and so they founded DF DAO, and I was pretty skeptical. But I was interested in blockchain. I think it was one of those things I'd been hearing about in terms of like finance and in terms of like speculation. And I was like, this kind of stuff, it isn't like the first thing I would go to out of college. But then like I started to get a little bit more into Dark Forest. Um, and then I started to hack on Dark Forest, and then kind of all of a sudden, like we were battling in a official Dark Forest round, uh, fighting really hard against our big rivals, and then that just kind of spiraled into us trying to mod out our own version of Dark Forest, and so we ended up just like hacking on top of Dark Forest for a few months, honestly.
Mm.
And then we kind of reached the point where we were like, this code base, it's just old and it's a dinosaur, and there's so many great tools out there that we could be using. And so we kind of wrapped up that project. Um, and then I went to London, and that was kind of how I kind of fell down the rabbit hole. It was a really deep hole, deeper than I expected for sure.
No, no, I can't imagine, and it's quite. Uh, I think a little unique in that you jumping into on-chain games was kind of the first thing you started to do in Web3. I think a lot, or even most of the people we've spoken to, including ourselves, have kind of come from doing some other stuff first in terms of like DeFi or, at least some smart contract stuff, right? Do you have a background in like computer science or anything like that, or did you just kind of learn on the go?
Yeah, so I got a degree in computer science in university, and then one of the first things I did was do the consensus boot camp, and so that just kind of like let me get my legs under me in terms of just like how to build dApps, and so that was. And then honestly, a lot of my education was just through reading Dark Forest, seeing how they use ethers to send transactions, how smart contracts handle things like storage and logic and like gas optimizations, all that stuff. It all just came from like studying really deeply the intricate workings of the Dark Forest code base,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I think was just like a really great grounding for understanding how to build these more complicated dApps as we move towards a world where dApps are getting more and more intricate.
Absolutely. I think no one can argue that if you can build a game on chain, you can build any kind of dApp, right? Because they're so they involve everything. I mean, I'm not even the technical guy on our team, but I have an appreciation of everything that my co-founder and the team sort of do as well. And I think it was Gubsheep who put out that early article about why on-chain games, push the state of technology, right? Without
Right.
having the stakes be, oh crap, I've just got hacked and I've lost $1 billion as happened in DeFi throughout,
Yeah,
the past few
absolutely.
years. So, no, that's fantastic. Okay, well, talking about the program that was in London by the 0xPark guys, like, what was that like? And I mean, it must have been amazing to be amongst everyone, just sort of at that point in time, just kind of hacking away together. Tell me more about it.
Yeah, it was great. So I was actually in New York as well for there was a another residency for Xerox Park. And so I kind of got to know the Lattice team while there. They were all in New York, but I was still focused on my Dark Forest work. And then, and so it was just kind of me doing my thing, and it was the Lattice guys kind of heads down building their game engine Mud. Um, but then they invited me to London, and they were like, "This is going to be like the legit residency where like it goes down, and like cool people are going to be there who like you're going to be able to work with." And I was like, "Oh yeah, this is sweet." And so, and I have some connections to England, and so it was one of those things where I was like, I would be interested in going there just for my own personal self as well. Um, and so and so they so I arrived there, and immediately there's like all these interesting people. I'm sure you saw a lot of them watching the Mud talks at or the Lattice talks at Bogota. Um, a, a wide range of like young solo developers like myself who just kind of like showing up. Um, got a lot of interesting ideas, don't have a lot of manpower, and just like want to experiment and see what comes out of it.
Mm.
And then there's some more established, um, larger teams who are like really trying to push out some really interesting products as well. And so it was a great balance of like just like seeing how different people operate, people from around the world coming in, um, and then it was just kind of all of us degenerating in like the co-working space, working long hours, like hanging out, going out for drinks, that kind of thing. So it was a great atmosphere. Um, and then the result, if you saw the demo day, was like a range of different projects of different scopes. Zero knowledge proofs were explored. Um, I really focused on like making a new type of game. Um, Other people were doing more like social experiments.
Mm.
And then, of course, like the whole theme was autonomous worlds. So it was trying to see how like we can unlock something that's larger than any one project, and how the blockchain can enable like these different ideas and these different projects to kind of coexist in a world that nobody necessarily controls. So yeah, it was a great experience, and I'm still in contact with a major, probably almost all of the people that I met while in London. I'm still chatting with every day in Discord, collaborating with, planning. So it was great.
Awesome. And is that where you, uh, well, obviously you started to work on Dark Seas, Dark Seas there. Tell me more about how you sort of decided to go down that route. I remember reading some of your tweets, and it's inspired by the what was that Star Wars tabletop game called? The was it X-wing
It was
or
called X-Wing, yeah.
X-wing and obviously FTL. I think everyone I speak to who's involved in on-chain games knows FTL, right? And we're all space
Yeah.
nerds, so it makes sense. But yeah, tell me more about how you sort of came about working on Dark Seas as an idea.
Yeah, so I think it honestly germinated right when I kind of started playing Dark Forest. Like I remember the first time I played Dark Forest, I just kind of jumped in. It was like I feel like it's the classic Dark Forest experience, where you spawn into the world, you're like, what the hell am I looking at?
Mm.
I don't know what to do. And it's like, oh, I just like dragged something from one planet to another, and now it's going to take 20 minutes for that thing to happen. And I was like, and so I think Dark Force is a great example of like it's got a really compelling game loop, but that game loop kind of unravels over the course of weeks, right? Like
Mm.
some of the great stories and events of Dark Forest literally took days to occur. And so I was always like, how can I like kind of harness that feeling and that energy that Dark Forest has, but bring it way down in scale so that like I could just pull up a game with some friends and like they kind of start to get it. Um, and so that was kind of like the origin of my interest in this field. And so that was also kind of the inspiration for the Dark Forest Arena game that we made last summer. And so that was trying to essentially do just that. Like, can we take Dark Forest, squash it down into the space of like an hour and make it a compelling battle game? And what we found is that it was really difficult to do that, primarily just because of how Dark Forest is set up. Well, firstly, just because like Dark Forest wasn't really the code base wasn't designed to run those kind of rounds,
Mm.
and so and since it has some really complicated like zero knowledge proofs going on, it wasn't super easy to work with or kind of uh, mold the code base how we wanted it to go. But then the other problem is that the game is designed so that as a player, I have a bunch of different planets. And so it's really hard for me to like kill you, like me shoot you down and like eliminate you from the game, because you'll always be able to fall back to another planet. Um, and so from there, um, all these ideas are still going on. And I really just wanted to like, all right, you own like some units, these units can do some stuff, and I can shoot your units and like watch your units explode and die. And so that was kind of the the seed idea that I wanted to explore.
Mm.
And so I'd been chatting with my friend Will, um, and he is like an expert in all things board games. And so he was like, "There's one game that I think is a really good fit, and it's the X-wing game." And so how the X-wing game works is you control multiple units, and you like decide what all of the units are going to do at the same time without anybody else being able to see what they do. And so I choose all my moves, you choose all your moves, and then we both reveal our moves at the same time. And then based on where our ships are now positioned, you might be in my firing range, so I might be able to shoot you, or vice versa, or maybe we'll shoot each other at the same time and we'll both take some damage. And so I think that was kind of like a game loop that was compelling enough for me to just want to basically take another shot and see one last time, like, is it possible to make a more fast-paced high action game that is also like much more approachable than a game like Dark Forest or some of these other grand strategy 4X games that we're seeing on blockchain nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
um, and just run with it. And so that's kind of like where it started. So I just kind of like was just like, this is the game I've always kind of wanted to see if it would work. Let me just run with it and see what will happen. And it actually just started as like a 1 month hackathon while I was in London. I started it around a month before the end of the residency, and I was like, I would just want to see if like I can throw together the kernel of a game, and if it would be compelling enough as a concept to just like keep seeing if it's worth building on top of. And so that's just kind of what I did. And so by the end of the residency, I had like a really rough version of the game that was like barely playable. Like people were getting pissed off because like they didn't really know why their transactions were failing. It was all kind of the classic stuff. Um, but yeah, and then I was like, I think that this is cool enough where I want to try to make it so that like I can show it to my parents, or I can show it to like my friend who doesn't know what a blockchain is, and like they will kind of start to get it. And so that's kind of where it's taken me up to this point.
That's awesome. Um, I think movement, right, is one of the inherent challenges of on-chain games that Web 2 games just have all the tooling and everything done for it already. When you're trying to sort of explain to someone like why it's so much harder to have like two moving objects know how to hit each other for an on-chain game, because you need to know their relative positions and you can't do dead reckoning and all that kind of stuff, right? Um,
Right.
how would you, in your own words, sort of describe that challenge to people? Because I think I mean, most of the guys that probably watch this stuff have some interest in on-chain games, but we think that there are probably some other people who may be looking at building on-chain games, and if they come with any kind of Unity or Unreal background, they might not understand. It's like, why do we have to like plan all of our moves beforehand? And
Yeah.
yes, I'd love to get your take, considering that your game has movement as part of it, what those
Mhm.
challenges look like.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of technical limitations that make it such a difficult problem that kind of combine to make it even larger. The first one is just the fact that you want to minimize transactions per second on a blockchain. And so, since there's like high latency with any one transaction combined with a relatively high failure rate, you really want you really can't have players like performing any given action more than once, maybe every like 3 to 5 seconds, if you're using some of these like a very advanced test net, which is really pushing the boundaries of like what a blockchain is. For like obviously for something like if you're running it on mainnet Ethereum where block time is 12 seconds, then you can't do an action more than 12 seconds at a time. And so that means that you obviously you can't have these games where you're like pinging the server 30 times per second or whatever, updating your position constantly. It's just like it's just like point blank, like if you're trying to build that game, don't do it on a blockchain. You're going to have to figure out a way to make it so that your action only updates every few seconds. And then I think the other kind of problem, which is related to that, is the absence of a game tick. And so, obviously, in a traditional video game, every 60 seconds, the game kind of re renders and everything updates, even if you're not touching anything. Um, and on a blockchain, your pieces or your units will only update if you or somebody else has sent a transaction that changes their state. And so this means I can't just like set my ship off, like I'm gonna sail north for 30 minutes,
Hmm.
and then like the game like automatically will sail my ship every second. It'll move however many squares. If it runs into an island, it'll like navigate around the island, something like that. And so everything that happens in the game has to be enacted by the players. Now there are some one of the projects that came out of London was looking to see if you could like embed a game tick architecture into a blockchain, which was a really cool project. And there's actually like a repository that people can use to kind of spin up their own game tick blockchain now. But generally, and like for like a real like for a person trying to make a game that will actually be on like a public blockchain in the next 5 to 10 years, like this is probably not something that we're going to see. And so, kind of these two problems combine and make it so that movement is really difficult, um, because we want, I don't know, it's just like all about like pushing the limits of the blockchain, but also like respecting the blockchain as an architecture, um, and like trying to work within those constraints.
Yeah, they're fantastic. That makes a lot of sense, even to my smooth brain in terms of taking it in. So, I have heard about this concept. Uh, I think it's not a concept, but ZK circuits, my co-founder, sort of has talked about in the past. Do you know much about that, and is that a viable solution, do you think, for on-chain game developers to explore for getting around some of these constraints that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I think zero knowledge proofs are a really powerful tool, and they're specifically really useful if you're trying to have players hide information.
Speaking of the devil, my co-founder Maresh has decided to join us. So I think he'd be pretty curious to hear what you say. Maresh, Hank,
Hey, nice to meet you. How are you?
um,
For some reason, I thought this was at 10 o'clock. My apologies.
we're in Australia, we're in Melbourne, all time zones. You know, go out the window. Everything is upside down for us. Even me trying to schedule this thing for Hank, I think we went back and forth a few times. But just to bring Maresh up to speed, we were talking about the London residency that Hank participated in and how he started to develop Dark Seas. And I've just asked him a question about ZK circuits as a way to potentially get around some of the constraints that you would otherwise need a tick for example. So, um,
I think the Fraser, no, not Fraser.
Flynn? No. Wildwood guys were doing the ticking chain, right? Or somebody.
They were using a ticking chain, but somebody else built the ticking chain. I have the Git for it, and
Yeah, is it Bytes?
yeah, the real bytes guy.
Yeah, the real Bytes. Yeah, he's one of my friends who came out of the London residency as well.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think that seems to be a good or an interesting way to solve for the NPC issue. So I'm probably
Mhm.
going to spend a bit of time trying to leverage what he has done. I think he has built the ticking chain on top of by forking Optimism Bedrock stack.
Yeah,
Uh,
he has. Yeah. Yeah, so you can do that. And another clever solution that I think the same guy is working on or was working on at one point was precompiles. And so what a precompile is you essentially embed the computation into the Go script itself instead of running it as a Solidity uh, smart contract.
okay. Yeah.
And so this means that you can greatly increase the efficiency of the script that you're running. And so you can just save a ton of gas. But obviously, the issue with that is that you have to embed that into the protocol of the blockchain itself. And so, for example, if I want to have like an NPC that performs some action, and I know exactly how that NPC is going to act, I can just embed it directly into the protocol of the blockchain, and then whenever I call that function, it'll be like however 100 times more efficient to run. This is actually how like 0xHank works in Solidity at the moment. 0xHank is just a precompile that's already sitting in has already been written in Go, and so it just saves some gas.
Okay.
So that's like kind of another thing. There was a team at the Linux residency who kind of combined the tick chain and these precompiles to make little NPCs that would like approach you and like try to fight you. They made a little like a zombie apocalypse kind of game.
Are you talking about the Wildwood guys?
Yes, the Wildwood. Yeah, that's the team.
I think we saw that. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. So they were using both precompiles and the ticking chain.
They were, yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
And just before you came on, Maresh, Hank, you were going to talk about a bit about ZK circuits. Do you think that's something that more and more of us will start to use going forward, or is that a different thing?
Yeah, so ZK circuits are a really useful tool to try to. So first of all, they're famously used by Dark Forest to hide information, and so Dark Forest used them to create like the fog of war concept, where like you have to mine the map to be able to see what's at that location. But there's been like new work that's been done, which is just like rapidly increasing the complexity of the zero knowledge proofs that we could see in games. And so you already mentioned Flynn. So he has been building kind of like a tool set of interesting like experiments where I can go like hide. We can make certain parts of the map hidden from other people. We can use like some staking incentives to uh, force people to reveal themselves if they've been shot by their enemy, or even like you can have it so that you can only see certain parts of the map at a certain time. And so I think these tools are still in their infancy, and there's a lot of work to be done optimizing them.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of promise just in terms of kind of opening new game mechanics that we haven't seen before, just because like blockchain is everything public.
Yeah.
Everyone can see what's going on.
The way I see ZK circuits is, I mean, like there are two main applications. One is to achieve information asymmetry, which to some extent what Dark Forest as well as the ZK Hunt guy, Flynn,
Yep.
was trying to do.
Yep.
The issue which I see with the approach which Flynn has, and I'm sure he's working on to resolve it, is it's an interactive proof, as in like the other guy has to either say yes, I was there or not there, and he is using financial incentives. But there is an additional step over there where the other party has to say yes, yeah, you caught me or you didn't catch me or something like that. So
Yeah.
I think that sort of needs to be addressed somehow, and I don't know yet how it can be done without like he's using staking for now, but maybe there is some other clever way to achieve that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's definitely a tricky challenge to solve. Maybe there is some like non-interactive proof that you could generate that would work. But yeah, it's definitely not like my personal realm of expertise, like
Fair
the
enough, yeah.
intricacies of the ZK.
Where I'm sort of more interested in seeing the applications of ZK circuits is the kind of work the Battle Rollups guy did.
Mm-hmm.
Fraser, Fraser.
Yep, Fraser, yeah.
So that where at the end he shows that demo where there are these boxes and triangles bouncing around, and he has built a physics engine over there. I think that's something which could be very interesting if leveraged correctly, so that you don't necessarily need to write every single transaction on chain, but sort of patch it up and then send a proof along with it saying that yes, okay, we did that. That would allow potentially smoother gameplay and more transaction throughput, so that some of the stuff can be just handled client side, and then periodically you send a proof.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like a modified like roll up to a certain extent. It's like,
Yeah, I mean it is a roll up. Yeah.
yeah, and it's trying to figure out, yeah, it's like I think even more basic is like encoding really complicated actions into a ZK proof.
Hmm.
And so you can have like a lot more computation being performed in a single transaction, and it all gets like rolled up into this proof. And then all you need to do is provide the proof and like the state change, and then that can be computed as well. So I think that's another interesting angle that you could take with it as well.
Within this, so that's not really a roll up, right? I mean, like you just do the calculations, and then within you basically are just posting the proof alongside the state change. Has
Right.
anybody actually implemented this as of now? Do you know?
I don't think I haven't personally seen anybody implement something like that. I don't think that the games that have been created to this point have had computation that's expensive enough to need that. But maybe if we start getting into the realm of having like complex 3D movement, which requires like high levels of calculation to perform, or like some kind of massive batch transaction, which is the kind of thing that my game features,
Hmm.
where you have like a single transaction that's just performing a ton of different tasks,
Hmm.
then I think that would be a really good fit.
Yours is the Dark Seas one, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was very impressed with the way you could move ships in a curved manner. I think, use Bezier curves, right, for that.
Yeah. So it's actually all just linear trigonometry. It's all just like vector trig.
Yeah.
And then the Bezier interpolation stuff is just happening on the client side.
Okay.
But yes, like I think the movement, I was excited by the movement in Dark Seas because it was like a new way of moving around a map that hadn't been done previously.
So we have point-to-point movement. Sean can maybe show it to you later on, where like we have our ships and they move from one point to another point, and but they all move in a straight line.
Right.
What we do is we do have some mechanisms by which we see if there is something along the way which sort of blocks your path, and then we prevent both the UI and the contract side from triggering if there is. So we have written up some code sort of that sort of searches for entities which lie on the path, and we have to build a bit of search for that.
Right.
We haven't done curved paths yet, but I think you mentioned that in your case as well, the actual path is really that curved rendering is just client side, right?
Yeah. So how it works is it's just it. So it's all based on vectors, and so the input is a direction and like an amount of rotation that the ship is going to execute.
Hmm.
And then it takes the starting point and it calculates the endpoint from that information. And so you can have ships that kind of turn and move maybe 45 degrees. But that's all, it's all a single action. And so it's, I guess behind the scenes, it's almost like it's teleporting from point A to point
Yeah.
B.
Yeah.
But you can have it so that it's kind of making these, it's affecting the rotation as it's also affecting the direction. But yeah,
So right now we
nothing
are
curved yet.
So right now we are working on figuring out how to not have them teleport, as in like, because every transaction on blockchain is really one block. If you move from even the adjacent cell or somewhere else, what we're trying to do is we are using timestamps effectively. We calculate how much time it would have taken, and then that state is deemed to be effective only after that timestamp is passed.
Right.
So we haven't done that yet, but we'll see whether that works or not.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really tough. It's just like always balancing like transactions per second, balancing how much gas each transaction costs,
Yeah,
and trying to make something that like feels that has that feel of like I'm actually moving from point A to point B. And
yeah,
I think it's just like it's one of these trilemmas where it's like what do you want to sacrifice in order to optimize some other thing?
yeah.
Um,
While also ensuring that the whole thing is fun.
exactly. Yeah, always point always pointing towards fun.
So what's
Neither.
next for Dark Seas, Hank, in terms of your development? Obviously, you had some play tests recently. Is that what you're still actively working on? Or you building any other secret things in the background we can get our hands on and play with as well?
So no, so right now I've just been really trying to polish up Dark Seas and get it into a state where anybody can just kind of sit down and figure it out quickly. And so right now I'm trying to figure out how to set it up so that like anybody can just create a game and share it with their friends and just like hop in. So I'm just really trying to focus on kind of like getting it out into people's hands, kind of advertising like the potential of on-chain games to a broader group of people. I think that um, a lot of the people who were introduced to Dark Forest were kind of afraid. They were like, "Oh, this is really hard and confusing. Like, are on-chain games just destined to be these like mega nerd battle games where like 99% of people just like get scared off?" And so I really want to see like what happens when we can just be like, "Hey, like non-technical person, like you can be good at this game fairly quickly as well." Um, but after that, like once that's implemented, I'm gonna start turning my attention to unlocking some of the novel blockchain affordances that have I kind of haven't integrated yet into the game, and that's kind of like where things start to get really exciting. So some of these classic talking points of like how to make the game interoperable, how to get people able to build on top of the game and kind of make their own game modes or make their own versions of the game without it being like super difficult to do so. Kind of these are the next questions that are on my mind that I want to explore now that I'm fairly happy with kind of like the base game loop.
Fantastic. Do you have any more play tests coming up, or is the next thing for Dark Seas is just it's going to be out there and anyone can play at that stage?
Yeah, I actually have I'm trying to just keep running play tests. I'm gonna do uh, a play test. I don't know when you guys are dropping this episode, but there's gonna be a play test on Thursday. I think it's the second. And then yeah, just after that, every week, once or twice a week, I'm just gonna try to pump out play tests, just get people interested and get them familiar with like how the game works.
Yeah, awesome. I think we can schedule this episode to come out tomorrow, and then we'll plug the playtest at the same time and put the links in there. So that'll be yeah, we'll definitely do
Yeah,
that.
great. That sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. We'll try to
I
join
have
as well.
a bit of a technical question. I think there are a lot of on-chain games. I mean, like there are some on-chain games which are being developed, and different groups have taken different approaches. There are people who are going down the Starkware path, Starkware, Starknet path, and uh, like the Loot ROMs guys, for example. And then there are people who have been in development for almost a couple of years, like the Mithraeum and a couple of other ones as well. Mud is a relatively new phenomenon. So and then there is so basically then there is this third tranche where there are people who are staying EVM and they are building on Mud and might probably go down developing their own app chains using let's say Bedrock. Now, obviously, we know that you are developing on Mud, or we knew that you were developing on Mud, but since you mentioned about interoperability and getting other developers to build game modes on top of what is already there, that kind of sort of leads into the question about what will end up being the standard for on-chain games, because likely uh, whichever has the most amount of obviously the player base as well as the certain amount of affordances in terms of the tech stack will end up sort of attracting the developer attention if that actually ends up happening. We assume that will happen. Uh, but which of these three, or like maybe there are probably even more than that, which of these three things do you think will end up becoming some sort of a leader in terms of the on-chain gaming development standards? Or do you think that, okay, that question is not likely to be answered anytime soon, or everybody will do their own thing? What's your overall take on this?
Yeah, so I personally have been kind of less interested in building on top of Starknet simply just because Cairo is such a bear to try to handle. And I think that my focus has been like, how can I optimize fun as quickly as possible? And like trying to hack my way through Cairo was not the solution for me. I wanted to like basically get my hands on the most powerful tooling I could so that I could build the most fun as quickly as I could. And so that's kind of why I opted for Mud. Um, Now, I think Mud at the moment, it's obviously a fairly new technology and they're still trying to improve it. I think that there's a lot of just simple optimizations that still need to be performed before it's really in a condition where it could be viable for a roll up or some kind of mainnet deployment, just because some of the calculations that it's doing at the moment are somewhat unoptimized. But I mean, they have a really great team that's working really hard, and they're like squashing all of these things. But at the same time, I've been hearing a lot of buzz about Cairo 1.0 and about how great it is and about how it's unlocking a lot of really cool new capabilities for the builders in the Starknet ecosystem. And so I personally don't know a ton about that technically, but I'm definitely interested to just kind of check it out and see if it really has legs to uh, kind of take us to a point where like great powerful games can be built using that tech stack. And then what was the third option that you mentioned?
Third option was really the people who are pre-mud, uh,
Mm,
basically who have been building on EVMs, but mud wasn't around then, and
right.
they sort of are kind of almost building their own clients. Yeah.
So I think Maresh, before you arrived, I talked with Sean about my experience building on Dark Forest, and so I
Hmm.
feel like that's for me. That's like where I my mind goes when I think about like pre-mud or like completely ground up game engines.
Hmm.
And my experience with that was that it was it was a lot more work to implement new features into the game. And so that's kind of
Hmm.
like what Mud is optimized for is iteration speed and kind of flexibility in terms of like what you're building. And so in Dark Forest, adding a simple new feature, like maybe adding a new spaceship, would
Yeah.
require going through all layers of the stack and like modifying all of the
Yeah.
different types and threading it through into the client
Yeah.
and through the network layer. So I
I
definitely
think we
think
share a
that,
very similar journey over here.
yeah,
Yeah, we
great.
we we started looking at Dark Forest and like we're like, holy shit, what is this? And like a lot of respect to the guys who made it, but I mean like that code is not really upgradable or extendable. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that at the very least, what Mud has shown is that like having a game engine which kind of takes the onus off of developers, we're reaching the point where that's pretty much necessary in order to kind of build the kind of games that we want to see.
Hmm.
And so at the moment, Mud is great, and I think Mud is in front. Um, but I think kind of maybe the most important thing it's shown is that like the community is ready for bigger and better tools that allow us to explore deeper and further. Um, and so I think that's kind of where what I've gathered in my time building on top of Mud.
Yeah, yeah.
And
No, I think
we've already
we have, yeah.
seen a couple like new tools that some of the Starkware developers are interested in building that kind of are inspired by the way that Mud is set up using things like the ECS system.
Yeah.
And so I think that that is the path forward for everybody.
Yeah. I think the ECS is like more of an development standard almost, rather than a mud or, and it's used across gaming industry as well. But I think the Starknet Lutram's guy is in Sydney, so we speak with him from time to time. I think the one key thing which Starknet potentially offers is the fact that the amount of computations which can be done, the statics is much deeper than your typical EVM. But having said that, I'm absolutely on the same page with you. I know a bit of Solidity, not too much, but Cairo is a completely different beast. Plus, they are really creating a complete new language almost. With Cairo 1, which is built off Rust. So I would say that, or at least my impression is, Mud has some more infrastructure tooling, and there is an independent team which is completely focused on infrastructure alone, whereas most other people have to build their own game while also building the infrastructure tooling. So time will tell, I guess.
I agree. And I mean, I also don't think that they're mutually exclusive. Like, I think kind of the goal of Mud is to be able to be used across the ecosystem on any DApp. And so I could see a future. I don't think this is happening at the moment, but I could see a future where Mud is adapted for use on different virtual machines on top of Ethereum. So I agree that I think time will kind of tell where these tools and these technologies will kind of lead us.
Is there any plan for Dark Seas to become like an persistent, almost an autonomous world, or are you envisioning that it will be like short games which people will spin up on their own, or do you envision a sort of almost a metaverse which is like Dark Seas centric, and then it turns into its own autonomous world?
Right. Honestly, I think that the base physics almost kind of feel like a base level protocol that you can kind of build out of it what you want. Just having like it's essentially at its core, it's a phase-based game where players like perform moves for a certain amount of time, and then players perform actions for a certain amount of time, and then the next turn begins. And so I think that it can really be taken in a lot of different directions. One of the things that I've considered right from the outset is building some kind of game like Agario. I don't know if you guys have played that, agar.io.
I used to play that in high school, right? Is that the flash? Was it flash? But like the balls kind of, you try to swallow other balls, right? And the biggest ball wins.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I've been throwing around the idea of just like putting a world out there where you're just trying to survive for as long as you can, and the more enemies you kill, the bigger your ship gets. And so there are these giant ships who are really powerful, and if you bring them down, then you get like a ton of points. And so that's definitely something that I'm interested in. I think in terms of like really going whole hog autonomous world, like really trying to build out some deeper ecosystem is just, I think that scale is not something I've considered deeply yet. I'm really trying to build as small as possible for as long as possible. But I'm definitely open to it. I think it'll be really cool, but it's also, there's such a can of worms for trying to design and balance an ecosystem like that. Like we've seen, like there's so many different economic issues to resolve There's also like what happens when one person or one team just comes to dominate and rules over the entire
Yeah.
game. And so like these are, I think at the moment, those are issues that I'm happy to see other people try to tackle, while I just really focus on just trying to make like a fun game to get in the hands of.
That's a very good approach. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a similar approach to what we're taking as well. Because
Yeah.
we came up through the whole DeFi summer. We built dApps. We built all these different protocols within DeFi. We saw things get manipulated, exploited in any which way, and including some of the early games like Axie, obviously, where the tokenomics just completely destroyed the gameplay. So happy to give that some more time and let other people sort of figure out a balance whilst we can concentrate on just building the game.
Yeah, I mean, like remember the Mithraeum guy has the cultist approach. So there is an on-chain game called Mithraeum. And what he has is, if certain things get out of balance, then the whole world gets burnt down effectively. So
interesting.
That's one way to.
Yeah.
So he basically imposes, or he has this mechanism to impose a reset, which is like. But I think there are these deep questions which need to be addressed, and they will get addressed over a period of time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, another example is, have you guys heard of conquest.eth?
Yeah, by Ronan. Yes, I'm having a chat with him on Friday. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he can tell you much more in detail, but he's really trying to set up a protocol where his game is always being played on like the same surface. And I think at the moment, I don't know what the status of the game is, but a few months ago, there was one player who had kind of like eaten up the whole universe. And so I'm interested to kind of hear what his approach is to handling that and kind of like rebalancing everything when kind of the dominant actor takes over.
Yeah, we're looking forward to speaking to Vernon. He's an OG, isn't he? He's been building on-chain games for as long as anyone.
Yeah, he's the man for sure.
Awesome. Well, time has flown and we've pretty much reached an hour, but it was really good to chat with you, Hank, and it's always good to talk to other fellow on-chain game builders. But definitely let us know when the next playtest is happening. We'll release this episode to coincide with that, and we'll be participating. And we'd love to also have you participate in our playtest as well, of course, once we get that out there. And hopefully, I would say a week or so for our first
Absolutely,
private playtests.
I'm really excited to see what you guys have come up with. I've seen some of the screenshots you guys have been putting out, and it looks amazing. It looks really fun. So
thank you. It's there's a lot of fine tuning to happen, but the beauty of using this stack is that we can move very quickly, and ideas in the morning get implemented by lunchtime, and we can see if it's fun or not. So that's been really cool.
Yeah, we have come a long way, and I'm like pretty surprised. I mean, it took us a bit of time to figure out the ECS architecture and how things are like set up, but I think the mud guys were correct that once you understand it, you can iterate it pretty fast.
So you guys are building on mud as well?
Yeah, we are building on mud. We are using the ECS thing.
Cool. Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to that. I think it took me a solid week or two just to like wrap my head around how to organize the data. And then as soon as I did, it was like, all right, time to start like really cranking out some new features.
Awesome. Thanks again, Hank. I'll start editing this video, and let's keep in touch as well. I mean, it's always good to sort of be in contact with people in our sort of little community of on-chain game builders and bounce ideas off each other. And we might ask you some questions now and then, and feel free to ask us anything if you think we're doing anything that is interesting to you. So always good to make a connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've always loved meeting people who are really building cool stuff. It's rare that I would like to find people who are like boots on the ground, like exploring. So I'm really glad that we have been able to connect.
Likewise.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Hank.